Welcome to Patreon Goes Postal. Little change of venue here today. I'm broadcasting from my recording closet, so a little bit more cluttered, but we'll see if I use this in the future or if I go back to the old white room. But anyway, let's get on with the questions. No envelope today. We don't have time for envelopes. So, Bob Klein asks, I know this was 5.5 years ago, but did you ever hear anything from or about Rachel? There's a bit of a typo there. Sorry, Bob. The writer who plagiarized your work, Scumbags of the Internet number 10. Did she ever apologize or try to explain herself? Love your channel, by the way. Keep up the excellent work. Thanks, Bob. So, did I ever hear anything from Rachel? Not really. This is actually a pretty common question that I get, and I've never really had a great answer for it. Rachel never really reached out to me afterwards or anything. We did have words. She basically admitted that she had stolen my work, and I mean, what else could she have done, right? And she basically said that, oh, well, like I was stupid and whatever, and that I didn't make any money from it. If you watch that video, I talk about how there are ads in the video, ads on her blog, or whatever the case it was. It was a website called The Odyssey. I reached out to The Odyssey for a comment as well, and they basically also said, well, no one makes any money from this. Of course, The Odyssey then makes money from it, so I guess Rachel also didn't make any money from ripping me off, which is okay, I guess, but ultimately I would have preferred that no one ripped me off. That would have been much, much better. So, Rachel basically just sort of wrote it off as I was just young and stupid and I needed something real quick to do this because, the pressures of school. I'm like, no, I don't know the pressures. I mean, I do know the pressures of school. I had to prepare a daily show when I was in radio broadcasting, and I did it without stealing anyone's work. So, I don't know. It's just one of those things that will always just be what it was, and I have no idea what happened to her now. I don't know if she ever finished law school and became a lawyer or whatever the case may be. I've just decided, you know what? I don't really give a shit about her anymore, so I'm not going to go stalking her trying to figure out what happened to her, what her life is like now. But, it sucked. It was a real annoying time for me, especially at that point, because I think it was about 2015, as Bob mentioned here, and 2015, 2016, something like that, and I had just finally sort of gotten to a good point where, I was starting to get a pretty sizable following and everything like that, and then along comes some stupid bitch to just try and steal it, so. Infinite Ideas asks, what is your EDC? This is your everyday carry. Do you have a knife / multi-tool that you always have on you? Hot sauce? Adapter for recording equipment? CR EDC, for example. So, I picked this question because I think that it shows a sort of fundamental difference in Americans versus Canadians and the culture here. A lot of people think, I guess, that Americans and Canadians are the same. In a lot of ways, we are. I've mentioned before, we consume a lot of the same content. We watch a lot of the same TV shows, movies, listen to the same music. Everything that you guys get, we get. And in fact, Canadians are pretty much obsessed with American things. And that is why, for the most part, we had to have a law. We have to have a law here in Canada for Canadian content, because if we didn't, people just wouldn't, play or show Canadian TV and movies because they are inferior to American productions. Just is what it is. We don't have the budgets that Americans have. We don't have a lot of the things that Americans have. The depth of talent, all those types of things. We just don't have it. So, I guess you think that perhaps we are also as paranoid or perhaps as obsessed with self-defense. I don't know. Now, Infinite Ideas, I know, has commented on some of my videos that they have fundamental disagreements with me about my belief on things like guns and things like that. So this will probably not surprise Infinite Ideas when I say that I looked at this subreddit and they all look like goobers to me. Just a bunch of goofballs. REDC is a whole bunch of photographs of people's pocket knives. At least from what I could tell, various switchblades or maybe not switch. I don't know how legal spring-loaded switchblades are in the United States. So, and I also don't know if they care that they're illegal or not. But at any rate, it's just a bunch of pictures of people's pocket knives, and it's kind of sad. And I don't know what to tell you. I do not have a daily carry or everyday carry, except for the Beast and the Harlot. Right there, you know. But other than that, I don't know what to tell you. It was really funny to me, so thank you for showing me the subreddit. But this is, again, one of those things where if I'm carrying a knife and someone is going to attack me, they're not going to pull their knife on me like it's a movie and square up, okay? What they're going to do is stab me from behind or shoot me from behind or club me from behind. They're not, like, hey man, let's rumble like I'm one of the fucking Jets and they're a shark, okay? So I just don't really see the point. Some women in Canada do carry whatever they can legally carry, mace or things like that. You're technically not really allowed to, but what women do to get away with it is they will say, oh, well, it's for my protection from dogs. You're not allowed to carry in Canada anything that could be considered a weapon to be used against another human being. However, if you say it is for protecting yourself against animals because, oh, well, I walk my dog at night and, I just want to make sure that in case a coyote comes out or something like that, you can say that. And I don't know, sometimes the police will be like, okay, well, whatever. But other times that's not going to happen. So I guess if you come to Canada and you see me and you're like, oh, I wonder if I could kill Buckley, then I guess you might be able to, because I'm not carrying a weapon other than the fact that if you were thinking about doing that and you are going to do it from behind anyway, wouldn't matter if I had a weapon on me anyway. So Zach Hamilton says, you made mention of The Sword in one of your previous videos. Knowing that they are not super well known amongst a wide audience, does that mean they are a band you actually enjoy? I absolutely love their work and would be interested to know if you had any particularly favorite material. A lot of people think that because I make fun of music all the time, I don't like any music. I did mention in, I believe, either the last Patreon Goes Postal or the one before it, we did a sort of desert island, what would be my 5 movies, books, and albums that I would take with me. And a Sword album did appear on that. In fact, it was this Sword album. So, Age of Winters. I do own their 2 of their other albums, which their names escape me right now, but they'll go right here on the screen, and then, that's my level of preparedness that apparently I said I was going to try and fix on this type of thing. But, yeah, so I enjoyed their earlier stuff. Their most recent stuff, they're starting to veer more into hard rock, which is fine. It's not as good. I'd hate to be that guy. Yeah, their early stuff is better, but their early stuff was better, so I don't know what to say, unfortunately, but their early stuff was better. But I do enjoy their work. For those of you who do not know The Sword, they are kind of a slight ripoff of Black Sabbath's early work. So if you enjoyed music like Supernaut, for example, then you would probably enjoy The Sword. They are not as bad as Greta Van Fleet about it when it comes to their denying that they had influences. Greta Van Fleet famously denies that Led Zeppelin was ever a influence in their work. It's just like, no, we're more like AC/DC guys. Yeah, okay, sure you were, as you sound exactly like Led Zeppelin. But The Sword has mentioned before that Black Sabbath played a significant role in their early development. So I give them a bit of a pass on that, because it's like, well, you know what? If you're saying that you liked them, then we're okay with that. So, Hugger Derek, the movie theater assistant manager, not to be confused with Hugger Derek, the regular movie theater manager, I guess. Buckley, I know some of your previous Worst Songs videos gave some mouth breathers online the impression that you hate rap music. I'm curious to know what rappers/rap songs that you do enjoy. Keep up the awesome content, and I've been a huge fan for many years. I really should have erased that part of these when I did it. I easily could have, but apparently I just like to read people kissing my ass. So, yes, a lot of people just think that I full stop hate rap music. People in my audience certainly do. There are people who are still living in like the 90s doing like, oh yeah, they can't spell crap without rap. It's like, haha, good joke. You got him. But I do enjoy some rap music. I have mentioned some of the artists in videos previously, I think, as well as on live streams. So this is a quick, if you never tune into my live streams on Twitch, twitch.tv/doseofbuckley, feel free to check some of those out sometimes. I just stream it semi-random times, but mostly on weekends, once or twice a month. So, and then you can ask me these questions and get an answer right away instead of waiting 3 weeks. But anyway, some of the rap that I do enjoy includes Jadena. I mentioned Body Count a lot. I know that it's kind of cheating. Ice-T, of course, is a rapper, but it is a bit of a rap rock band or rap metal band, but I do enjoy Body Count, even though perhaps it is not made for me, but whatever. And I also enjoy Ludacris. So this is one of those ones where you're like, wow, Ludacris. Obviously, bit of a 90s Dirty South legend, right? But what I like about Ludacris is that is the gimmick, is that he is ridiculous, that he understands that rap music, to a certain degree, especially being performed by somewhat middle-class African Americans who pretend like they are straight gangsta, you know, going out selling drugs and fucking bitches and all this kind of shit, is absurd, right? And so Ludacris, taking both his name, his actual name Chris, and, you know, the word ludicrous, and mixing it into that, takes rap to that sort of level of like, you know what, I know that I wasn't born on the streets, I didn't live in the ghettos, that's just not who I am, that's not what I do, but, you know, I can still make fun of this stuff, and so, or I can still rap about some of this stuff, but under this persona. This isn't me, this isn't Chris, this is Ludacris, and, you know, he sort of makes that distinction, to me anyway. I could be completely wrong. People might be like, no, that he totally believes in this shit. And I've been living a lie my whole life, but, you know, I do enjoy the work of Ludacris for mostly that absurdity. So, but there are some others I mentioned, I wrote down as a guilty pleasure song, Chingy, Holiday Inn. This is a song that I definitely would have done a musical autopsy had I done a Dose of Buckley back in that time. And maybe someday I will. Maybe I will do a musical autopsy cold case. I've only ever done one so far. It was the Police song. But perhaps I will do a musical autopsy of Chingy's Holiday Inn at some point. But that was one at a job I had that we would play all the time, just to sort of annoy one coworker, and another coworker really enjoyed it. And so we would do that, and I would horribly rap to it, along to it, and I will not subject you to that ever, but that was always a fun time. So Gino Salvatore asks, if you had to drive one car for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I also threw in this one. Billy Hauberger asks, what kind of cars have you owned? Because I thought maybe there's some crossover there. But ultimately, I don't really... Sorry, Billy, I'm not going to really answer your question because of the fact that I don't really want to tell people, you know, the car that I'm driving right now. I guess, what kind of cars have I owned? Previously, my first car, which was like most people's first cars, I guess, was my parents' car, sort of given to me, was a 1999 Ford Escort wagon. And it was a beauty. It might have been a 98, actually, but it was it was gold, apparently, is what it said, but it looked like this sort of pukey yellow, garbagey color. And it was a Ford Escort wagon. So I named it lovingly the Heat Seeker, because the joke really was that it seeked no heat and generated no heat, both with the ladies or the police. I believed that I could not possibly have ever gotten pulled over in that car. It was just such a joke that people would be like, oh, don't even worry about that guy. But anyway, beggars can't be choosers. I needed a vehicle. They gave me that car to drive, and so I drove it, and it was great. But if I could drive one car for the rest of my life, what would it be? A lot of people probably think, Buckley's so macho, he's so cool, he's probably going to pick a muscle car or something like that. But I actually have a really weird obsession. A lot of people who know me know this about me, with tiny cars, with really small cars, called K cars in Japan. But they're not exclusive to Japan, or the tiny cars are micro cars that I enjoy. Some that I've liked over the years include the Robin Reliant, the three-wheeled piece of shit car that used to chase Mr. Bean in his car. And we never got to see the driver, I don't think, for those of you who ever watched Mr. Bean. The Nash Metropolitan, which features in UHF, the Weird Al movie. But I always wanted to have one of those. Just the good old classic Mini Cooper. And from Japan, I really, really like the Daihatsu Copen. So it's kind of like a little sporty looking car, except for the fact that it is very small. And I've always wanted one. Unfortunately, import laws make that very difficult to get a Daihatsu Copen here in Canada. You have to wait for a car to be 15 years old. So at this point, I could drive, I guess, a 2006 Daihatsu Copen. I would have to try and find a 2006 car that is in good condition, that I'd be willing to pay for. And most of the time, when I do look online for things like that, people want $10,000, $15,000 for it. I'm like, $15,000 for and the import fees, I'm sure, because it's coming from Japan. So $15,000 for a used car that probably didn't cost $15,000 there, because I don't think that, I could be wrong. Maybe I've never really looked up what Copens are actually worth over in Japan. And unfortunately, I'm just not willing to pay that kind of money for a 15-year-old used car with a whole bunch of kilometers on it. So, unfortunately, I probably will never own a Copen unless I decide to get real stupid with my money. Kaylee asks, in a video from 2018 I can no longer find regarding the song I Might Go Lesbian, you mentioned showing something on screen without reading it, and you say, sorry to all my blind viewers. Are you making a joke, or are you aware that you have blind viewers? I know of at least 3, including myself and my friend, and I got a good chuckle out of it when we watched the video. So I couldn't find the actual clip you were talking about. When I mentioned I might go lesbian at least the first time, it was in my 2015 Worst Songs video, the 10 Worst Songs of 2015. I don't remember mentioning it after that particularly. I know I have, but I can't remember exactly what video I may have mentioned it in, so if anyone else knows, then feel free to let me know. But I do know, and I am aware, perhaps maybe not as much back then, that I have a pretty sizable following of sight-impaired viewers. And I say sight-impaired, but it's funny actually, because it's not funny, I guess, but that a lot of people who reach out to me and say that they are blind use the word blind. They're like, I'm a blind person, or I am blind and I enjoy your work. They aren't like, I am sight-enabled or sight-disabled or differently abled sight-wise, or, whatever sort of politically correct terms that we are supposed to use, I guess. Blind people generally just tell me they are blind. And so, yeah, I have a somewhat huge, I guess, blind following. And I've joked in the past that I wished all my viewers were blind, because then I wouldn't have to make all the visuals. But unfortunately, I don't remember what exactly it was that I showed on the screen when I said that. Otherwise, I would put it up here and I would show it, and I would explain it to you, what exactly it was, I guess. But part of what I have always done with A Dose of Buckley anyway wasn't intended obviously specifically for the blind. That wasn't my mission statement going in or anything like that, but I am trained in radio broadcasting. That is my first and most important training, and that is the sort of first inspiration for A Dose of Buckley. And when I first started doing A Dose of Buckley, it was all on a website, and it was all just MP3 files. It wasn't visuals. It wasn't on YouTube. For those of you who have seen or listened to, I guess, Buckley, the early years on Bandcamp, and if I haven't put that on Patreon, I probably should. But for those of you who haven't listened to that, there are a ton of a ton of audio clips on there I never turned into videos. And because that wasn't the intention. The intention was to use YouTube as a means to try and get people to come to my website. YouTube was supposed to be advertising my website. And that didn't really work out. Most people just don't want to go anywhere. And I talked about that in my most recent video here on Patreon, the stats for the worst songs of 2020. So a little more insight in that there. I won't go back into it here. But it didn't really work out, so I just said, fuck it. I'm just going to start putting these things on YouTube. And I started to try and get at least a little more elaborate with some of the visuals. Obviously, they still aren't overly elaborate, although sometimes I do use actual video footage and things like that. But for the most part, it's just images. But I always try and write every video as much as possible to be that it's not important to have to look at the visuals, where they only add, a little bit to it. They may include some extra visual jokes or things like that. However, you aren't losing anything by not seeing them. The video itself could be listened to. The point could be made without those visuals. So a lot of times it just may include some extra evidence or a screenshot of a news article that is, this is where I got this from, or that sort of thing. So it's just sort of sources and things like that, as opposed to actual, like, oh, my point is actually being made in the visuals, and I'm just rambling on for the sake of rambling on to hear the sound of my own voice or something like that. That's not the case. Script is the most important thing for my videos, and the audio production, obviously, and then the visuals are kind of just there to serve YouTube. And as much as I try and make them interesting and funny at times, I feel that my blind viewers or listeners are not losing anything by not being able to have access to them. So it's always been important to me before I even knew that I had blind viewers or listeners. But I'm glad I have them. And so those of you who are blind, thank you for continuing to listen. Darren Morris asks, I know you're a comic fan, so if you could have a story of your choosing adapted into a movie, which story would you choose? And this also ties into another question from Cody. We all know you're a huge nerd. There's all my Judge Dredd books. We all know you're a huge nerd, so I've always wondered what your favorite comic books are, favorite superhero, that sort of thing. So we'll start with Darren. Any story I could choose to be adapted into a movie. I've got props for this one. We'll just go with this right here. And for me, that would be Kraven's Last Hunt. It's right here in comic book form. I'm just being covered by it. But it's a 6-part series crossover that took place in Web of Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man, and Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man. 6 issues there. And I always wanted to see it turned into a film. The problem with doing that is that, and the reason that Kraven's Last Hunt is so good, is because of everything that comes before it. So I don't think that you could just introduce Kraven and then do Kraven's Last Hunt. It wouldn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion. But the story, for those of you who don't know, and I'll try and keep it relatively spoiler-free, is that Peter has been going through just hell up until this point. He's finally dealt with a situation that he's been dealing with over the course of, in comic form, like 3 years or something like that with the Hobgoblin. He's been facing, his villains one after the other, and he's just getting the shit kicked out of him. And in the meantime, he also finally gets MJ to say yes to him to get married. And I believe at this point they are married. So he's just got married. And MJ, of course, in the comics at this point has been the, ever doting girlfriend and worried for Peter and wondering, is he coming home tonight every single time he goes back out on patrol and so on and so forth. And he doesn't this time because he gets shot by Kraven the Hunter with a paralysis dart or some sort of knockout dart or something like that, and buried alive. And Kraven takes Spider-Man's suit and says that he could be basically the superior version of Spider-Man. He can do what the Spider did. And so he dresses up as Spider-Man and goes out and fights crime, but in his own way, where he's just beating the fuck out of these criminals, showing no mercy. I think he either puts one in a hospital or he kills a guy or something like that who's just robbing a woman. And he is just completely fucking out there. And during this time as well, Kraven, I believe, goes to hunt a character by the name of Vermin, who lives in the sewers. Anyway, it's very complex. There's a whole thing that goes on with it. And I don't think that you could just do the next Spider-Man MCU movie after the next one as Kraven, or Kraven's last time. It wouldn't make sense without introducing Kraven first, because you have to also get all the backstory of the fact that Kraven has been beaten time and time again by Spider-Man, who he believes that he should be superior to, and he doesn't understand why he hasn't been able to get the best of the Spider before all of this. So it's good stuff. I enjoy it, and that's the movie I would want to see at some point. Or you could just do it as an animated movie, sort of like the DC movies they've done with Batman Year One and Batman The Dark Knight Returns. So I think that because then you don't really need the context. It's really, you know what? This is an animated feature for comic fans, and if you don't really get it, I don't know what to tell you. Too bad. Whatever. Now, as for favorite comics, Cody had asked me about my favorite comic books and stuff like that. I want to take a quick chance to talk to you about other comics besides superhero comics. A lot of people, when they think about comic books, all they think about is nerdy-ass superhero bullshit. And unfortunately, I totally understand why that's the case, and that is the most dominating force in comic books. Comic books and superheroes, synonymous. They are symbiotic, like Venom and Eddie Brock. Sorry, I had to do that. But that being said, there are many different genres of comic book, and a lot of independent comics that have absolutely nothing to do with superheroes and things like that. There are comics like Southern Bastards or Why the Last Man that are a little bit more dramatic in nature, that are grounded in reality in some ways. Horror comics like Crossed, for example, by one of my favorite writers, Garth Ennis, who I'm going to talk about in a second here as well again. But where it's, if you like horror films, there are horror comics out there that are going to do pretty much the same thing for you. And I want to talk about my favorite genre of non-superhero comics, which are war comics. Vietnam Journal. This one by Don Lomax. And so Vietnam Journal is a series that Don Lomax did about his own experiences in Vietnam. So he is an actual Vietnam veteran, and he details some of his sort of experiences there through the eyes of a journalist that everyone calls Journal. This character is a fictional character, but all of the events that he goes through are real events. And so it's an 8-part series or 8-book series that he originally did, and he is actually continuing it now, but it's a great sort of history lesson on Vietnam in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of historical war comics like that I enjoy. Garth Ennis writes several. He's written war stories, He's written Battlefields. Those are 2 separate series of different comics that he's done about various wars, and they're an anthology. So each one details a different sort of battle, different person's struggle. One of my favorites in Battlefield is The Night Witches, which is about a female fighter pilot as part of the Russian Night Witches group, the 588th, I believe, who learn to use biplanes to drop bombs on the Germans by cutting their engines at a certain point, coasting to the enemy with the engines off in the middle of the night so the enemy can't hear them, dropping the bombs on them, and then once they hit that drop, they hit their engines, get the fuck out of there, right? But that's a really good story, and yeah, he's done a whole bunch of ones from different perspectives. And what I like about Garth Ennis specifically is that almost none of his stories are about Americans' involvement in the war. Some of them are, but a lot of them are from the sort of British perspective, the Russians, as well as the Germans in some cases. Sort of these German soldiers who are starting to realize what, is actually happening, because a lot of them didn't know certainly about the concentration camps and things like that. Some of them were just like, oh, I'm here to fight for the fatherland, and this is what it is, and didn't realize the atrocities that were happening. Then there are stories about the people who are sort of realizing the extent of their own atrocities, what they have done, and having to live with that, and real human stories that I think are very interesting, that are more important than just the same old fucking superhero bullshit. So if you are interested in comic books, but you're like, or you're interested in the idea of the medium of comics, but you're like, but it's all just superhero bullshit, feel free to reach out to me and ask me for, you're like, I like this genre of movies and TV show, what might I like? Or, I like this show or this movie. What would I like as a comic? And I will do my best to try and help you out there, because I think that there are certainly more to the medium than just superheroes. And my last question is, Connor Mason says, it's clear that this is a long one, by the way, it's clear that despite digital music distribution shaking up the industry, it is still firmly in the control of the record companies. Do you think that these new sites and services, iTunes, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, etc., have had a positive impact on small, homegrown groups, or is the marking and royalty structure still too convoluted and meager to put much pressure on record companies? Conversely, or additionally, do you think new technology has made startup radio more viable, or are the operating costs still too high for small fish to make it without considerable ad space? In short, do you see a good path forward for independent and or radio unfriendly music? So there's a lot going on here. Let me just quickly gloss over the fact that startup radio, I suppose, is as viable as it's always been. You can now just do it from the internet. I would not recommend going out and buying your own equipment and trying to start an FM radio station. That is still way too expensive and impossible to do without ads, of course. Internet radio, possibly a little bit more so. However, you do need to pay for licensing for that kind of thing, and that may be too costly, especially without ads and without a solid listener base to help pay for that or something. So radio, let's just not even worry about it. However, music distribution and things like that, that's a little bit more interesting, because when we talk about that, the short answer, the TLDR on this is that no, none of those sites have made any real difference, and that the labels are still firmly in control. I say this because, for the most part, it's impossible for someone, in their closet, making music, to just get out there and guarantee themselves that they're going to be a hit. It's just not going to happen for most people, right? Happens by accident sometimes. And I've talked about that in previous videos, like my music versus the internet, or the Hot Problems video from years ago, is that most of the time it's just shit that gets shared really heavily and goes viral. Something like Rebecca Black only became popular because of how bad it was, whereas you never see the inverse. You never see something that is just so incredible, so good, that you're like, holy shit, I gotta share this with everyone, right? No one cares about that. But when it's something stupid, we share it. It's unfortunate. So perhaps that's your path forward. And there's a young lady whose name escapes me right now who is currently trending and is the #1 song on Spotify with a song called Driver's License. And people would probably look at that and go, yeah, but look, like, so anyone could be a star. It's like, well, she was also a Disney star. She was on Bizaardvark and something like that. Olivia Rodrigo, I believe. And again, I should have been more prepared, but their name and picture will be right there. But you guys may have seen my Krayshawn video, where Krayshawn signed a deal that was just stupid, made no sense, was ridiculous. And but unfortunately, a lot of people get talked into these types of things. She got like $1 million advance, and now she owes the record label still 8 years later, like $800,000 or something. I can't remember what she exactly said, but it was something like that, right? The reason for that is because of these bad deals where they don't know. You're a musician. You're not a lawyer. You're not a business person. You just go, oh my God, $1 million, gimme. I'll take that. Yeah, for sure. And you get fucked. And at the end of the day, you're nobody. And she had one big sort of viral hit, and that was it for her. So I think that certainly there's a possibility in that way. Not for her, but for some stars, someone like Taylor Swift, for example, could have signed smaller deals earlier on in her career. But she might not have been able to. That's the challenge. But if she could have tried to sign, say, a 1-year deal or a 1 or 2 record contract, get them out there, become famous, see where that takes her, and then say, you know what? I don't need the label anymore. That's what musicians need to do, is start using the labels more so than the labels use them. That all being said, we're talking about millionaires becoming millionaires. In terms of making a living at it, there's been no better time than now, I would say, for that, to be able to either make a living doing sort of independent entertainment, or at the very least supplementing your own income in a meaningful way. And Bandcamp is great for that. I will sing the praises of Bandcamp all day because of the fact that they pretty much take about 15%, as opposed to the labels, which probably take 50, 60, 80%. I don't even know, right? So if you're an independent and you can make that work for yourself, absolutely great. And then, of course, services like Patreon, like OnlyFans in its own way. I know that a lot of people, the stigma of OnlyFans will always exist, and a lot of people just think that it's for girls taking naked pictures of themselves, but other people use it in other ways. And that all being said, I think that there is, with the sort of, I believe I've talked about this in other places as well, but the sort of collapsing of the monoculture, right? The idea that not everyone is always listening to the same things anymore and watching the same things anymore. And we may never see a sort of experience like Survivor again, right? Where it's this reality show everyone's talking about, everyone watches and things like that. Now it's more segmented, and with, of course, all of these different streaming services and shit like that, right? You can only consume so much, and every individual can only consume so much, and yet there's just so much that we are being bombarded with. And then there's fucking YouTuber assholes, and there's all these other things that are going on. And I think that if you can get a small but loyal following who are willing to help subsidize you in certain ways, either by paying a monthly sort of support on Patreon, or by buying your music on Bandcamp and things like that, then certainly you can make a go at it a little bit easier than you certainly could have in, say, the 80s, where if you couldn't get your music on MTV, Like, fuck you. You weren't going anywhere. But, so now more than ever, you can certainly make some money doing it, but you're never going to get rich. That's going to be a lot tougher. It's going to only happen for a very small number of people, the same way that it only happens for a very small number of people now or in previous years, based on the old systems. But I think the labels are still going to exist for a long time. I think that the most famous people, the most famous musicians are still always going to be there. And if they weren't so good, you know, what's interesting to me is Lil Nas X had the biggest song of 2019, right? And massive song. The song holds the record for the longest number one on Billboard, right? And he was an independent when he put that song out, and then he signed with, I believe, Sony. So there's got to be something to it that artists still believe, where the big money is coming from record labels. Now, it is telling that Lil Nas X hasn't put out anything else since then, but that being said, who knows what the future could hold for someone like him, and who knows what his future would look like if he just stayed independent. But I think that time will tell. I think that we'll hear in 5 years he's going to regret signing with the label when he didn't have to. But almost everyone else, they have to. Krayshawn wouldn't have even had one hit if it weren't for the label involvement. And she knows that. And obviously now her career isn't doing very well with the amount of music that is being listened to on Spotify of her new music, and the sales of that and that sort of thing. So hopefully that answers that question. Hopefully that answered all your questions. If I didn't get to your question, there were still a lot of good ones. I just didn't choose because of timing. And unfortunately, this ran way longer than I wanted it to as well. But you know what? I will do some more of these next time. So like I said, if yours didn't get picked this time, don't worry. I will look back at those questions again for the next version of this. But thank you for watching. Have a great one.